The Buffalo Bills 2020 season in a lot of ways was a big step up from their 2019 season. In 2019, they lost an electric playoff game to the Houston Texans, in which Josh Allen tried to hurdle the ball back, and there was really a lot going on in that game that signaled then that they had a very bright future. And not only that, but a few months later they made a trade to acquire one of the best receivers in the entire league in wide receiver Stefon Diggs. Now, the step they took in 2020 was ginormous, from not only their team, but from Josh Allen going from a player that a lot of people had questions on to being not only a legitimate franchise quarterback, but an MVP contender and a player who was very much an MVP caliber player if Aaron Rodgers did not have an all-time historic season. But can the Bills in 2021 take another step and take, just as big of a step as they did from 2019 to 2020, and can they legitimately compete for a Super Bowl? They lost in the AFC Championship game to the Kansas City Chiefs by multiple scores, but can they close that gap, and did they do enough this offseason to go to the Super Bowl and even win it? They would then have to beat who we would assume is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but what we're going to discuss in today's video, and by the way, you guys can see this is an old style of video where there is no face cam, but what we are going to discuss is the Bills' possibility of dethroning the Kansas City Chiefs, as they are now back-to-back AFC champions. But before we dive into that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as each only take a second to do, and it would be very much appreciated. Now, let's begin. So when discussing the Bills 2021 season and the possibility that they can compete with the Chiefs or even beat the Chiefs at in the 2021 season when it matters most, aka in the playoffs, you have to look at what it's going to take for them to get there. And I do think it's fair to say the Bills will win the AFC East in 2021. And not to say it's going to be easy, because the Dolphins are probably going to take a leap, and I would certainly expect Tua to be much better in his second year than he was in his rookie year. And I would also expect the Patriots to be back, per se, after bottoming out in 2020. Now, I don't think Zach Wilson and the Jets will be a threat to the Bills in 2021. I don't think they're going to be bad for long, but for this year specifically, which is what we are discussing, I don't think they're going to pose much of a threat at all for the Bills, and I do think Buffalo is going to sweep them, so that pretty much will eliminate the Jets for the rest of the conversation for today. But anyways, what you also have to look at for the Bills is opposing teams in the AFC, as the AFC, despite Tom leaving at the end of the 2019 season, is honestly pretty loaded, and there's teams throughout the AFC like the Ravens, the Browns, the Chiefs, the Chargers now with Justin Herbert, and plenty others that I didn't mention yet. And what's going to be concerning for the Bills is if they don't get the #1 seed, they're going to have to win 3 playoff games just to get to the Super Bowl, with presumably one of those being in Kansas City or at minimum against the Chiefs at home. And what I do think will obviously benefit the Bills is Bills Mafia is going to be back full force due to every NFL stadium being 100% capacity, which, by the way, is awesome. And it's going to be tough for any team to go into Buffalo in the playoffs and actually beat them with Bills Mafia effectively taking a year off due to COVID. And I don't expect the Bills to lose a playoff game in Buffalo this year due to Bills Mafia being a 12th and really 13th man at that point, because I definitely expect the Bills Stadium to be rocking. And not just the Bills Stadium, but we all know the Bills fans are crazy with jumping through tables and everything else, and for them to have a year off was not really fair to the Bills, and by the way, it wouldn't be fair to a lot of other teams that have crazy fans, such as the Seahawks or the Chiefs, for example, that get really loud and truly do present a 12th man. But Buffalo in the playoffs this year will be a truly dangerous team, because they're not only going to have an MVP caliber quarterback in Josh Allen and an all-pro receiver in Stefon Diggs, the 12th man will affect every NFL team that goes in there, as there really is no way to prepare for it. And even for players that have played in big stadiums like Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State in college, that have played with more fans than what the pros present, you never really get used to playing in those types of stadiums. You never really get used to 110,000 people in the college stadiums and 70,000 in the pros just screaming at full force and, not even being able to hear a quarterback in the huddle. So that will 100% give the Bills a true 12th man and will make them a much, much harder team to beat in the playoffs this year when the time comes. Now, what I want to get clear, because this title of the video is related to the Bills and, can they beat the Kansas City Chiefs? But what I do want to get clear is, especially if you are a fan of the Baltimore Ravens or the Cleveland Browns or anybody else in the AFC, what I want to get clear is just because the Bills and the Chiefs were the final two teams in the AFC last year does not mean they are automatically assuming they are going to be the final two teams this year, because that is certainly not the case. And obviously, we don't wish this to happen. Let me get that 100% clear. But, Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes could get hurt, and that could very easily end either team's season. And it would if either one of them get hurt. Obviously, we don't wish that. But what I am saying is teams like the Cleveland Browns, who, by the way, are one of the most complete rosters in the NFL, the Tennessee Titans, who now have Julio Jones to go along with Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, and Ryan Tannehill, are also going to be a very tough out. And, of course, the Lamar Jackson-led Ravens, who they finally got the monkey off their back last year and won a playoff game on the road. So all of those teams are going to be easy outs, and of course we assume Justin Herbert will take a step up, and a lot of people are assuming the Chargers are going to be in the playoffs this year with the expected progression in year 2 from Justin Herbert, as there's a very good reason to think that him and Keenan Allen and everyone else on that roster are going to be more than ready. And if the Chargers can finally get a year where the injury bug, forget an injury bug, it's more like an injury animal for them, if it doesn't completely just bite them in the rear end, then there's a very good possibility they will be a very tough out, and they will be 100% in the playoffs if they can stay healthy. And we obviously hope Derwin James is also healthy, in mentioning the Chargers. So I just wanted to get clear that the Bills and the Chiefs are not the only two teams in the AFC. Now, do I think they are the favorites in the AFC, those two teams specifically? Yes, I do. But what I do want to say is there's a good possibility Cleveland goes 13-4 this year, and they could very well have a higher seed than the Bills, which would then mean Buffalo would go to Cleveland for a playoff game. And Cleveland, as we know, everyone has got their jokes in about the Browns at some point, whether it's taking the Browns to the Super Bowl or anything else over the past 20 years. Cleveland has been a joke of an NFL team, and it's going to be crazy how much the crowd will react when the Browns host a playoff game, because surely at some point within the next 3 years, the Browns will win the AFC North. And when they do, host a playoff game for the first time this millennium, it's going to be absolutely insane. Whether the Bills play there, or anyone else plays there, it's going to be an extremely hostile and tough environment for any team to go in and actually then beat the Browns. So what also must be said about the AFC is I do think the Chiefs, again, barring something unforeseen crazy, will be in, at minimum, the AFC Championship game. And not to say they're going to be the Patriots of the 2010s, but of the 2020s and go every single year but 2019. But I don't think they're going to be knocked off before the AFC Championship game, because you would have to figure it would require a team to go into Arrowhead, and not to say it couldn't happen, but I would just be surprised if it did. And granted, the Browns almost did last year, credit to them. I would just be surprised if the Chiefs lose before then. They are going to be, again, I don't want to compare them to the Patriots, but they're going to be something similar to that, in the sense of they're going to pull tricks out of their hat and everything of that nature that we saw last year. Chad Henne throwing to Tyreek, with Tyreek doing the quick out to seal the deal, and it's going to be like that for these teams like the Browns and the Ravens, who in a sense really have to learn how to win the big games. The Chiefs have a Super Bowl ring. They do have a Super Bowl ring where the other teams in the conferences do not, with the said quarterbacks that they currently have. So it's going to be a learning process for other teams. So I do think at minimum the Chiefs will be in the AFC Championship game this year. And the question now is, did Buffalo improve enough to beat them? And the Chiefs, I thought, really had, and what's crazy to say is I thought they had a very good offseason. Their offensive line is now one of, I don't want to say the best in the league, but it's definitely the most improved from the end of the 2020 season to now, and I don't think there's really any disputing that. Look at what they did this offseason. They signed Joe Thuney, they traded for Orlando Brown, and what was a heck of a pick swap for them, and they saw Patrick get really crushed one game and said, all right, look, we've invested $500 million into this guy, and we're not going to see that happen again. So, forget everything, let's drop everything and build an offensive line around him with what we can, and they did exactly that. So I don't think Buffalo will be able to compete with them in terms of that in terms of a pass rush getting after Patrick Mahomes. Now, can they compete with them offensively? Yes, I do think they can, and the Bills' offense is going to be very good in 2021. I don't think there's really anybody, saying they're not going to be good, but the question is, will they be able to not only get to the AFC Championship game, but will they be able to keep up with Kansas City? And I do think they can keep up with Kansas City if it gets to it again, if they are the final two teams, or even if they play them in the divisional round, because I do think the Bills are going to have to go through Kansas City to get to the Super Bowl, and really that's for anybody. I think whether you play them in the AFC wildcard round, if they are not the number one seed, the divisional or the championship game, I think at some point you are going to have to go through the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes to get to the Super Bowl and to get to the big dance. And I don't think the Bills pass rush, granted they did improve it with Greg Rousseau, the first round pick, I don't think Greg Rousseau will personally be able to generate 4+ sacks and just absolutely disrupt a game in his rookie year, especially in the playoffs. But I do think the Bills offensively will be able to compete with not only Kansas City, but with anybody. But I do think their defense will let them down a little bit. And not to say they're a bad defensive team, because they're not, but I don't think the Bills are quite ready to get to the Super Bowl. Now, if they do, would I be surprised? Absolutely not. They are a very, very talented football team, and what's going to be good for the defense is they're going to have to limit teams to, 30 or less per game, because the Bills offense is that good. Now, anyways, that is going to wrap up today's video. I hope you enjoyed. For anybody that wanted the old style of videos, well, today you got your wish. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and until next time, have a great day. Love you guys. Deuces. Peace.